Part 3. The Memphis 8. Spider-Man 3 saved my life. Sort of. Spider-Man 3, the movie, the game, was the canary in the coal mine that taught me to watch my back at GameStop, and it clued me into what was happening behind the scenes in Memphis. Let's start at the beginning. In May of 2007, the big merchandising blitz arrived for what was definitely going to be the greatest comic book movie of all time, Spider-Man 3. It was a different time. I was working at GameStop that day, the day that all the tie-in video games released. Since this was 2007, there were half a dozen different product SKUs all hitting the same day. PS2, PS3, PC, 360, GBA, and DS, LOL. So, imagine my surprise when, that very afternoon, one very jittery dude walked in looking to trade in every single one of those items. For cash. Duh. The man had a stack of just discs and cartridges, no cases, with at least one of each version. A stack of the game that had been on shelves for about 6 hours. All sparkly and new. For good measure, he even had 2 of the 512MB Xbox 360 memory cards, the new large at the time cards, that had just come out the previous week. Now, usually, somebody with something suspicious would launch into a spectacular soliloquy about why they're trading their unusual things in. Oh, they were gifts, but I don't need them. Or, I beat it really fast and I don't want it anymore. Or, I gotta pay a speeding ticket, so I need some cash fast. Or,
I have a structured settlement and I need cash now.
I would love to know what precise excuse he was going to give me for having 7+ copies of the game with no case, ready to sell after owning them for all of one apparently exciting morning, but I didn't even take the time. I just told him, no, I can't take this. He said, okay. And he left, and I wouldn't even remember this event if the story had ended there. Within an hour, I got a call from the manager of the GameStop 3 miles down the road, screaming at me. He had just finished giving that fellow cash for all of these items and heard that I had turned them down. He was pissed, somehow personally pissed. You never fucking turn down trades, he said. What the fuck do you think your job is? The entire one-sided, comically loud conversation had a tone as if he were accusing me of robbing a cash register. It came down to telling me I'd get fucking fired if I ever pulled that shit again. He was the longest-running veteran manager in the area and the district manager's de facto right-hand man, so his threat had weight. But apparently the point needed to really be driven home, because I got a call from the district manager himself right after. Now, he was not the screaming type, but his message was precisely the same, right down to some key phrases. That's not your job. That's none of our business. It doesn't matter where they got it. Never turn down trades. And the phrase that sticks in my mind the hardest because they both said it word for word. If you want to play detective, you can go join the police academy. If things turned out to be stolen, he said, then we would cooperate with the police. If and when the police happened to come around asking. That seemed to be his reassurance that it was fine to take in blatantly stolen goods. In the days that followed, all the other longtime employees in the area confirmed to me that yes, this is the way of things at GameStop. My own store manager literally told me to not ever get caught turning down stolen trades, or else yes, they would have him write me up and or fire me. Do not get caught not breaking the law. What? Now, this boss was less of a true believer than the rest, and he actually gave me a valuable tip. When faced with blatantly stolen goods, give them an excuse. Don't turn it down. Just say that you don't have enough cash on hand, or that you couldn't take it in its condition, or that you left the iron on at home. Just send them along somewhere else. I ended up doing exactly that for years, and it kept my nose clean. I mean, it kept me out of trouble. It had zero effect on my cocaine intake. And so, unlike the title of Sam Raimi's memoirs, my experience with Spider-Man 3 saved my life. Because don't play detective was how GameStop operated nationwide, and cooperating with police didn't mean turning over records, it meant turning over employees. It was just 1 year later that a set of headlines lit up my attention like Gondor calling for AIDS. Aid, singular, sorry. The news was out of Tennessee. 8 Memphis area GameStop employees plead guilty to theft. Arrested in a sting operation for trafficking in stolen property. Undercover police, quote, made it very clear that the games were stolen, yet GameStop's employees still accepted the games. The coverage was not particularly kind to these 8 hardened criminal masterminds. GameStop Regional VP / Great Value Ice Cream Flavor Rory Rhodes was even more unkinder.
GameStop takes this situation quite seriously,
said Mr. Rocky Rhodes. Quite seriously, he said. I was working in a different corner of the country when I heard the news, but suffice to say, I was dubious as fuck. 8 employees, now convicted criminals, all for taking in stolen games. The corporate regional vice cream president was aghast and surprised.
That's my 3rd monocle this week. I simply must stop being so horrified.
Alarm bells were ringing in the sides of my head, but were fortunately drowned out by the air raid siren that started blasting when corporate passed down a new policy that same week. The GameStop Cares form, adorably nicknamed by our regional and district handlers the Care Bear forms. This was a cute and curry-wheel document that suddenly every single GameStop employee in the nation had to hurry the fuck up and sign. So what was this? It was GameStop Concerned Associates Reaching Equitable Solutions, a binding mandatory arbitration agreement. In plain speak, for people who don't happen to be spineless corporate patsies, it is a contract waiving your right to ever sue GameStop Inc. for any reason. Once signed, any attempts at lawsuits will instead go to an arbitration company of GameStop's choosing. This was Reginald Vanilla Ice Presidio, Rhode Island, taking it seriously. This week on Were You Aware?
Oppressive corporate bullshit.
It's
mandatory binding arbitration.
Were you aware? Mandatory binding arbitration contracts, or as the Economic Policy Institute calls them, a fucking epidemic, are not only a common practice enforced by large corporations to suppress employees and customers from filing single or class action lawsuits, but corporate arbitration firms have been found to rule overwhelmingly in favor of the corporation that chooses them. And then they bill the person who filed the complaint, which is warned up front so that the person usually drops the complaint rather than even risk arbitration. Go figure. Hold on to that GameStop Care Bear form. We're definitely going to be seeing him again. So, Memphis, whatever. The writing was on the wall. 8 GameStop employees pled guilty to taking in stolen merchandise and got criminal records, and suddenly, corporate was making sure employees all signed away their option to ever sue their overlords. Of all the news coverage, the only reporter asking the big questions was Ernest Cavalli over at Wired.
Most likely, these were just some teenagers earning minimum wage who hated their jobs. Those companies berate their employees to instill the idea of profits over all. So, if the choice is between accepting stolen goods, again, an occurrence that isn't exactly uncommon, and having your power-drunk boss cut your hours back to almost nothing, the employees will always choose the former.
With my cuddly cute Care Bear form now on file, I guessed that these employees had either been reassured or simply threatened into taking stolen merch, and they did as they were told. I then hypothesized one step further, that these employees had threatened lawsuit, and GameStop gave them a quiet settlement and non-disclosure agreement to just shut up and accept the worst trade-in deal of their short careers. I mean, probably the worst. Did you know that cockroaches can build whole nests inside the hard drive expansion bay of a used PS2? Nothing to worry about, really. Most intrepid do-it-yourselfers would just prevent these infestations by plugging up that empty space with used syringes. Oh, memories. I wondered for a very long time how things ended up for the Memphis 8. But in over a decade, nobody ever followed up or revisited the story. 12 years, and nobody brings it up. I even submitted tips to every gaming site that had covered the original story, suggesting that they look deeper, and none ever did. So, I just had to reach out to these 8 people myself, and a few of them actually told me exactly what happened, and my many hypotheses were wrong. What GameStop did was actually worse than I had even guessed. What happened? In fact, in 2008, in Memphis, a veritable cornucopia of stolen Halo 3s had been turning up in trade-ins, apparently linked to a shipment theft from a distribution center. A few stores had caught on and warned corporate that suspicious items were making the rounds.
Upper management told us to go ahead and take them after we brought it to their attention.
Of course, this was perfectly good merchandise that GameStop didn't want to pass up. But, as it turns out, behind the scenes, the police had already identified the thieves, and now they wanted to investigate how those thieves had fenced their illicit goods so easily. Now it was undercover cops carrying questionable Halo 3s, and the local employees had been ordered by GameStop to just take them. I'm sure that'll be fine. When the law came down on them, upper management put on its best surprised face, gasped, dropped its monocle into its tea, and washed its hands of the employees that it had just royally fucked over.
They literally put us out there as if we were acting individually.
Yes, they told the fuzz that these employees were renegades, playing by their own rules, renegade part-timers who just really wanted to break the law in ways that would benefit GameStop corporate and accomplish nothing for themselves. Maybe they own GameStop stock. But then, here is where GameStop went above and beyond to throw the Memphis 8 under the biggest and baddest bus they could find. Yeah, that's the one. Again, I had always assumed there was a hushed settlement, an NDA, some kind of payoff provisions to get these kids to take the fall and stay silent. No! There was nothing. Instead, GameStop Inc. generously provided their own company lawyer to represent the 8 of them, a high-paid, high-powered corporate business lawyer who heroically strode on in and told them that they had no option but to plead guilty and accept the verdict. And so they did. Thank you, GameStop. 8 people accepted guilt, confirmed to the court that they were acting alone and that GameStop had nothing to do with their personal decisions to break the law. As soon as sentencing was handed down, their expensive GameStop lawyer let them know that they were all fired, because obviously GameStop doesn't employ criminals. Obviously. With no prior records, they were all offered a deal. Plead guilty, and the felony theft comes down to misdemeanor theft, with 2 years on probation. Generous in terms of no jail time, but probation for theft is poison for every part of your life. That new criminal record puts a bright red stamp on your finances, your credit, your education, and your employability. One of the men I spoke to confirmed that he was unable to find any work whatsoever until those 2 years were up. I asked him, do you realize you had grounds for a lawsuit? At least he had grounds back then, not nowadays with GameStop circling the drain like the gold tooth you swallowed during your rollerblading accident. No, never mind, sorry, that was just a piece of corn again. His answer says it all.
I know that now, but I was a kid then.
Most of the Memphis 8 were in their teens or early 20s, young, eager part-timers who could not comprehend the magnitude of shit that Rogaine VoIP Rhodes Scholar had just dumped upon them. GameStop told vulnerable people to break the law, with both promises of protection and threats of firing, and then played the generous benefactor when it provided them with an attorney. GameStop did not provide them a defense. GameStop paid a lawyer to guarantee that they would take the fall and to keep the company smelling fresh as spring linens, or Hawaiian breeze, or 3 Doftelges granite apple. These 8 victims are not the exception, and they are not odd ones out. When GameStop hires you, you are only their employee until the moment you become their victim. GameStop cultivates employees to be cannon fodder, and these 8 played the role they were always meant for. They weren't the first, they're not the last, they are just the ones that GameStop made public example, and not one bloody thing has changed since. Even as their theft-fueled magical money machine struggles to survive one more fiscal year, GameStop still operates the same here in 2020, setting up employees to generate easy revenue until the moment they're served with a pink slip, or criminal charges, or a bullet. You heard me.